Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. It is Friday, February 5th of 2021. Welcome to the month of February, episode 44. We're glad to be with you today. Today's an exciting day because as y'all know, we're going to start the pitch party today at the end of the show. So we're looking forward to that. First, we're going to do COVID news. Then we're going to do an FDA education session on GMP for the rest of us, and hope you enjoy that. Then it's on to pitch party day one. We're going to tell you a little bit about it. We're going to give you the Walt Young rule, thanks to Walt's input on the show the other day. And then after that, we are going to have our first pitch, and we still haven't told you who that is, so we're going to keep that in surprise to the end. But with that, I want to move on to the COVID news for the day. As you know, we try to keep track of what's going on for you. We try to report on the facts as opposed to all the opinions. And we have used covidtracking.com from The Atlantic as one of our sources of truth in all of this. And today is a day of a lot of good news around the country. Not every region, but it's certainly on the whole, the hospitalizations are dropping. We like this comparison that we've shown you the last few weeks. We are now down below 100,000 occupied hospital beds due to COVID out of 924,000 staffed beds in the US. So that number is dropping very nicely. We're thankful to see that. By region, it's also looking good as all the regions are showing declines. And so that's good news there. This graph hasn't changed much, but it's generally good news, falling in 42 states, staying the same in 12, down from 13 last week, and still rising in 2 states. Looks like Texas and Guam. Wow, interesting. So that's all good news there. Here's the data from Michigan, and you can see that we are now below 1,500 currently hospitalized, down from a high of about 4,200. So that is really good news there as well, and I'm sure that's what you're hearing around. Of course, our family, we were very blessed to have a very mild bout with COVID a number of weeks ago, and we are thankful to be through that as a household. I'll say more on that and some personal anecdotes here in a minute. But we want to go on to vaccine distribution. This was a week we were disappointed by what we could find in terms of vaccine distribution numbers locally. There's been some infighting, there's been some disagreement about who should get vaccines. We're not going to spend a lot of time focusing on those negatives. There's a lot of good people doing good work trying to get that vaccine out to people. So we're going to jump right to the New York Times data that we've been following for a number of weeks. And I actually blew up the top section here so you could see it a little bit better. Share of the population of a state that has gotten at least one shot. That number has ticked up by 1% since the last time we shared that last week. It does remain that the most remote and seemingly least populous states are having the easiest time of getting a higher percentage out. We've talked about some of the reasons why that might be. Still some developing news there, but it's making its way around. And if there's any good news to share, we will continue to do that. There has been a lot of, blame going around, and we don't like seeing that. We just want to see people working to do what needs to be done. This is really interesting, though. We've started to see the news, and this from the World Health Organization. Third week in a row, the number of cases, new cases of COVID-19 reported globally fell last week. This from the World Health Organization director. And so that's encouraging news. Our friends across the pond noting that it doesn't look like the main driver here is the vaccines yet, because people haven't really gotten enough of that to make a huge difference. What is going on? Well, the point is we don't know, and we'll look forward to finding out as we have the opportunity to reflect on this in the past. But I wanted to share a personal anecdote with you. And that really starts with this, that a COVID negative test does not equal a negative COVID patient. That's a really important point. If you go back to the session that we had with Dr. Ing Pottinger from Columbia University way back in May, and we just got word that she's going to come back on the show in March and catch us up. You'll recall that she said in these kinds of situations, she has a lot of experience with HIV testing, you need multiple tests to be able to know what the true state of a patient is. Well, for better or worse, we got a chance to test that in our own household. We have a relatively large household with 11 people in it. And thankfully, and I want to emphasize this, thankfully, we had very mild symptoms. That's not the case in every case. There's a lot of folks who have died from this and received serious complications. In our case, we were really blessed to have some very mild cases. So mild, in fact, that we didn't even think we had COVID. And we were also blessed to be able to do some science on it. And again, I want to emphasize, not everyone has this opportunity, but I had the opportunity to go out and take 5 COVID tests. My first test with symptoms was negative. It was a rapid test. And one of my 4 PCR tests was negative. I personally had 3 positive tests and 2 negative tests with something that I can tell you was definitely COVID based on the symptoms. That's about a 50% chance that any one of those tests would have come back negative. Half of our household tested negative with PCR, but did have unique COVID symptoms, although very mild. We were blessed. I want to emphasize that. We were blessed to be able to treat this a little bit like an experiment while we quarantined and kept ourselves away from others. Many people don't have that luxury. For many people, that one test is going to make a big determination about what's going to happen with their income, with their work, with what they can do for coming weeks or months, or how it's going to affect their life. But here's the point. Anecdotally, in our experience and what we're seeing around the world, and what we heard from Dr. Pottinger, it's actually likely that infections are much higher than is being reported. So I wanted to share that. We don't know what the true story is. We're going to find out in coming weeks and months. But I want to emphasize this. Please take care of each other. Do what you can, especially for those vulnerable populations. Wear those masks, stay distanced, because we thought we didn't have COVID, and it turns out we did. But the tests, in many cases, still showed negative. So as we think about this data and we think about what it means nationwide and worldwide, keep in mind, tests are probably not giving us a true picture of the magnitude. We heard this back in May from Dr. Pottinger, and now we're starting to see that even at a personal level. So I share that with you for what it's worth, but again, we're going to keep it to the facts and try to see what is actually happening in the data as this goes forward and as we start to look back on this most recent peak that we've seen as a nation. That's the COVID news for the day, with a little bit of a personal anecdote, which part is only my opinion and just sharing what we've experienced here as a family. We want to go on next to our segment, which we're calling GMP for the rest of us. Many of you have heard about GMP, and you know it's an acronym that means something to your medical devices development process, but what does it mean? And you've heard a lot of acronyms get thrown around. Things like 21 CFR 820, you've heard us mention that. You've heard GMP, good manufacturing practices. CGMP, that just stands for current good manufacturing practices. Or QSR, the quality system regulation of the FDA. Guess what? Those are all the same thing. We just made that real easy for you. All those acronyms mean the same thing. But if you're a medical device developer, manufacturer, startup, this is going to matter to you. We want to demystify some of these terms and what's actually going on behind the scenes with GMP. So here's what we're going to talk about today: the scope and the purpose of good manufacturing practices, related concepts and their hierarchy, the parts of GMP that you're going to have to think about if you're a medical device startup. How does GMP relate to FDA clearance? Now, this is a question we get a lot. I know I've got to get my 510K or I've got to get my de novo. How does GMP relate to that? What's this audit I keep hearing about? How does that relate? And then finally, how do I go about implementing GMP? How do I actually make the rubber meet the road when it comes to good manufacturing practices? Well, first of all, the scope of GMP, and this is from 21 CFR, that's Code of Federal Regulations, Part 820. And the FDA says the requirements in this part govern the methods used in the facilities and controls used for the design, manufacture, packaging, labeling, storage, installation, and servicing of all finished devices intended for human use. We can learn quite a bit from that one statement. Well, there's one fallacy that goes around. Oh, I don't need to worry about quality systems. I don't need to worry about GMP because my manufacturer is going to worry about that for me. Well, is your company going to be involved in the design of your medical device? Is your company going to be involved in the delivery and fulfillment of your medical device or servicing of it? Guess what? If you are, you're subject to this. It says for human use. If you're just tinkering on your lab bench and you're never going to use these devices on people, but you just want to invent something, that's great. This doesn't apply to you. But when we're talking about putting it on people, GMP matters. So it's applicable to manufacturers read broadly, those involved in the design through installation and servicing of medical devices for finished human use. If you only engage in some of these things, then you really only need to comply with the parts that you're engaging in. That's great news. So if you're designing, you should worry about certain parts. And if you're manufacturing, you should worry about certain parts. And if you're worried about the installation of it, you can worry about certain parts. But FDA does take a broad interpretation of applicability. So this doesn't mean you get to just rule everything out, but there is some freedom to not have to implement everything depending on what parts you're engaged in. Well, what's the purpose of GMP or good manufacturing practices? FDA says that the requirements of 820 are intended to ensure that finished devices will be safe and effective and otherwise in compliance with the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. You've heard those terms over and over again if you've listened to this show and elsewhere. Safety and effectiveness. We want to know that devices aren't going to cause harm that we didn't intend, and we want to make sure that they're going to do what we say they're going to do. Device needs to be effective for its stated purpose. As you've heard me say many times, if you've got a scalpel, well, it just needs to cut skin. But if you've got a device that can cure cancer, you've got to prove that it can cure cancer. Those devices could be the same piece of hardware, but what you say they're good for, the intended use of the device, is what matters to the agency. Safe and effective. Well, here are some terms you may have heard thrown around, and all of these relate to GMP, to good manufacturing practices. You've heard the term quality system. You've heard the term quality policy. You've heard the idea of a quality manual or standard operating procedures or work instructions, records and forms. How do these relate to GMP? Well, in a nutshell, they are how you satisfy the good manufacturing practice requirements of the FDA. You need to have a quality system, but we can think about this in terms of a hierarchy. And that hierarchy starts with your quality policy. What is your organization committed to? What does quality mean to you? It may seem trite, and often you'll walk into a firm and you'll see a sign hanging on the wall and it'll say, our firm is committed to quality. That's the top level statement. If anything else in the organization disagrees with that, the expectation is that that will reign supreme over all other documents that you find inside that organization. If something doesn't line up lower down in the hierarchy, we need to make it conform to that quality policy. Well, under the quality policy lives a quality manual. This is the first thing that the FDA is going to ask to see when they walk through your door for an audit. We're going to talk about this a little bit later. They want to see that your organization has laid out how it operates. Underneath that, you're going to have standard operating procedures. You're going to have work instructions. You're going to have records and forms. Some of these may live at your organization, or your design and development firm, or your manufacturer. But these things all stack up into a hierarchy, and if anything disagrees, you want to go up that hierarchy to seek resolution for the disagreement. Well, before we talk more about the details of GMP, how does GMP relate to FDA clearance? This is a common question. People will say, I know I need a 510K, and I've heard about GMP. How do those two things relate? How do I get these two ideas to line up in my head? Well, before we make it simpler, we're going to have to make it a little more complicated. The short answer is it doesn't relate. GMP is how FDA expects you to run your company. It's not talking about one device in particular and whether you're allowed to release that device to market. So this gets a lot of companies into trouble because they can find themselves in a situation where they've gotten 510K clearance, but they haven't actually done the things that they're going to need to do before they put the device on the market. That's why we call a 510K a pre-market notification. It's just a notification and an agreement with FDA before you go to the market. It doesn't mean that all of the things that have to be done for that device to go on the market have necessarily been done. It's a major hiccup. We'll talk in a minute about which parts of GMP are needed to coordinate with your clearance process for efficiency. But this is an important point. If you're bringing a device to market, you've got to worry about clearance and you've got to worry about quality system requirements. They're not perfectly blended together. So keep that in mind. Let's talk about the parts of GMP. We at Into Being break them down into three sections, and I'll tell you why in just a second. Management and oversight, then design and document control, and then manufacturing and fulfillment. Why break it down into three parts when there are actually a bunch more parts to GMP, which we'll talk about in a minute? Well, because so many of our clients are interested in forming lean virtual companies. They want to leverage the skills of other partners. They want to leverage the skills of companies like Into Being that do design and development work. They want to leverage the skills of manufacturers. On the show, we've had our friends over at Keystone Product Development. The Keystone Solutions Group, they have a wonderful manufacturing floor. How do you leverage these kinds of entities? Well, it helps to recognize that GMP is pointing to different requirements that different partners of yours may have talent in. So, management and oversight, design and document control, manufacturing and fulfillment. Here's entities that often exist in a virtualized lean startup. You've got the startup itself. You've got the development firm that works with the startup. And you've got the manufacturing firm that works with them both. If you break GMP up this way, you're able to leverage the strengths of each of your partners and have to do the minimum on your own. Notice I said minimum. The biggest fallacy that we've ever heard in GMP land is the idea that if my manufacturer does GMP compliance, I don't have to do anything. And nothing could be further from the truth. When FDA walks through somebody's door, the first door they're going to walk through is the company that owns the product. Guess what, startup? That's you. That's not your development partner. That's not your manufacturing partner. They're going to come through your door first. We'll talk about audits in a second. But by breaking GMP up in this way, we're able to focus on what you need to focus on as a startup. We're able to focus on what your developers need to think about. We're able to focus on what your manufacturers can bring to the table. And it helps us to get a little bit of a roadmap to GMP. So here's the first section, management and oversight. Well, nobody likes to talk about it, but it's really, really important. And the first part is management responsibility. FDA wants to see that the management of the medical device company is taking responsibility, and there's some specific things that they expect. They also want to see that management is putting in place auditing capabilities and yearly audits of the company. Those are internal audits. That's so that you as a company can know that your company is doing the right things according to its quality system. And finally, there's this section on personnel, training requirements. If you're running a medical device company, you need to make sure that there are training requirements implemented for your staff so that they know what they need to be doing. And as FDA says, how their work impacts product quality. That may seem like a short section. There's a lot that needs to be done there. It needs to be embodied in, at minimum, a quality manual, and from there in other procedures. We'll talk about how best to do that for your company near the end of this presentation. But I want to go next to the section on design and document control. I won't belabor this because on MedTech Crossroads, we've talked many times about the importance of design controls and document controls, and I'm sure we'll do so again. This has to do with how you manage your specific product development activities. Words that you may have heard me use before, like design inputs, design outputs, verification, and validation, take you through the process of how your product design is executed and documented. And you'll hear us talk in many other segments about the details of design controls and document controls, a particular passion of ours here at Into Being. Let's take a look at manufacturing and fulfillment. This is by far the largest part of 21 CFR 820, and it constitutes subparts E through O. Now, there are some shared parts here, parts that you can't wholly push to your manufacturer. I want to make that clear. But there's many that a good manufacturing partner will be able to bring to the table for you, the MedTech startup. Subpart E, purchasing controls. How do we know that we're buying the right components and that they have the right specifications? That's something your manufacturer at minimum needs to document. Identification and traceability. How do we know that what we're building is making it through the process correctly and that we can trace what we've done? Controls for production and production processes. Acceptance activities. Oh, this is a big one. All the way through the development process, one of FDA's biggest questions is, how do you know that what you did is acceptable? And if a part or a device comes off of a manufacturing line, how do you know that it's good? How can you be sure? What is your process as a company through your manufacturer to accept product or to reject it? And for that matter, if you do reject it, what do you do with non-conforming product? Product that didn't meet your requirements. Do you have to scrap it? Can you rework it? Or, no, maybe it didn't quite meet it, but we're going to let that one go because it's not going to affect the final product quality. All these decisions need to be made and implemented. I hope that by talking about some of these, you can see where some of the hidden work in medical device development is. You get to your prototype and you say, oh, I think I'm basically there. Well, not with this stuff standing between you and the market. Labeling and packaging control. FDA has strict expectations on how you control the labeling for the product, because remember, this goes back to what you're saying the product does, and are you communicating that in the labeling? Handling, storage, distribution, and installation, all of these have to be considered. These, as well as corrective and preventive action, as well as records and servicing, are often shared procedures. Your company, sometimes your design firm, and your manufacturer all have to coordinate on how these are going to work for your particular product development and fulfillment cycle. Records, servicing, statistical techniques, all of these matter, and we tend to lump these in with what we call manufacturing and fulfillment activities. I want to talk now about how we relate GMP and clearance. You heard me say that they really don't relate. I'll give you one exception where they do, and this is really important. When you go to submit a 510K for substantial equivalence to a predicate device to be allowed onto the market by FDA, here are the sections of a 510K. It's not rocket science. They want to see things like cover sheets. Oh, that's exciting. Cover letters, still very exciting. Summary statements, A statement saying that you're not lying in this document. That's great. There's financial certifications and disclosures that need to be made. And then we start to get into the meat of a 510K, the indications for use and the intended use, which you've heard us talk about separately. Declarations of conformity to consensus standards, a description of the device, a discussion of substantial equivalence, labeling, sterilization, biocompatibility, software, electromagnetic compatibility and electrical safety, bench testing, animal testing, clinical testing. Where do these come from? Where do you get this information? Well, it turns out that design controls that you've heard us talk about is where that information emerges. So design inputs, which we have abbreviated there as DI, is where you get your indications for use statement. Verification and validation is where you get much of this, and that comes out of design controls. Design inputs for substantial equivalence discussion, design outputs for a device description and proposed labeling, design outputs for software, and the list goes on. This is one place where the quality system and your 510K actually mesh together. And so it's a very important thing to start early in the process, is, if applicable, to get into design controls. But is it always applicable? Well, here's an answer to that. And this from the Quality System Inspection Technique Guide by FDA to their quality system inspectors. And they note that the firm's development of concepts and the conduct of feasibility studies are not subject to the design control requirements of this regulation. However, once the firm decides that a design will be developed, a design plan must be established. A firm will determine when it will begin to apply design controls. However, design controls must be applied no later than the time the firm approves its first set of inputs. So this link between those two worlds finds its start when the firm approves its first set of design inputs. And from there, you need to start thinking about design controls. And from there, you need to build your management systems. From there, you need to build your manufacturing procedures, hopefully with the help of a great manufacturing partner. Well, what's this audit thing I keep hearing about? Here's where the rubber meets the road. When FDA finally walks through your door, you've got your 510K, you're on the market. Well, what happens if you forgot about all this quality system stuff? Well, at some point, FDA is going to walk through your door. The first thing they're likely to say is, can we see your quality manual? Well, you just passed the first test if you have one. And they'll start pulling threads, as we like to say. They'll start to ask, you talked about this in your quality manual. Can I see this document related to that? Well, you better have that document ready. Oh, this document says that you're going to do this thing. Can I see some objective evidence that you've done that? And if you're able to provide those documents, simple as they may be, you'll be doing just fine. If you're not able to provide those documents that show that traceability through the process, that's where things start to get messy. And many startups have gotten their 510Ks, forgotten about GMP, and then gotten audited, much to the dismay of themselves and their investors. So that audit is where this really comes home to roost, and that's going to happen a year, maybe 2 years after you register with FDA to go to market. So how do I implement this? Here's what we recommend at Into Being. Build your quality manual organically. Don't try to drop in place something all at once. It's not going to work. Feel free to contact us for recommendations on folks that can help. I want to emphasize we have done this ourselves at Into Being, but it's not something that we necessarily love doing. And we make recommendations on folks who can help with that. We are happy to pass those on to you. Get some help building your quality manual organically over time. That really matters. Leverage your design partner, a firm like Into Being. We want to help you through design controls and document controls as we're helping you develop your device. So those parts, you can lean on us. Folks like manufacturing partners, and there are many great ones. I mentioned Keystone Solutions Group, who's been a longtime friend in the community and have been on the show before. Ask them, hey guys, how can we leverage your manufacturing and fulfillment controls? They want to help you. Folks like them want to help you. And you should be asking, how can we leverage you for that part of GMP? And with that, that's your overview to GMP. If there's any specific questions about specific sections, we'll be happy to jump into them. There's a lot in there, but the main point is break it down into 3 sections. The first section is how are you going to build your quality manual? The second section is how are you going to get design controls going? And the third section, how are we going to get all that manufacturing stuff lined up? And if you're thinking about those 3 sections as your responsibility as a medical device company, you'll be well on your way. We've got a question here from our friend Nathan Jones. And Nathan asks, how does GMP relate to clinical studies, that is pre-clearance, which require IRB approval? Is it required? And Nathan, I need to brush up on the specifics, but you heard one part of it here, which is if you're just playing in the sandbox and you're not even getting to clinical trials, well, that's something that's not going to humans yet. Don't worry about it at that point. But you're talking specifically about when we go to trial. That really is something that comes down to the IRB. They need to be asking those questions. Here's the dirty little secret. Many IRBs don't understand what their requirements are that FDA has actually placed on them. So we see a high level of discrepancies on what they're asking for. In general, what you want to be doing is doing as much of GMP as makes sense, especially when it comes to things like design controls for that device type. So there's many times the requirement will be report to the IRB what your current status level is with GMP. Remember, GMP is a work in progress. So you want to do what is ethically reasonable with respect to where you are in that process. But when it comes to design controls, for example, you're not going to be at the end of design controls when you go into an IRB, especially if you're using that IRB for your device clearance. And so it's one of those things you have to look at it and you have to say, where are we in this? What's reasonable? What's not? And many times the requirement is to report your current status of GMP compliance. But that is something your IRB should be asking. It is something they should be taking responsibility for. We often see that that is a ball that gets dropped in the IRB process. Our friend Ken Spencer has his hand raised. Ken, we're going to make you live here in just a second. Okay, Ken, you are live with us.
Thanks, Gene. So listen, really great presentation. One of the interesting dichotomies we've seen in, I work at MCirc there at University of Michigan, and we've always been trying to get out of just pure research, but getting devices, out into the marketplace. And a lot of the larger firms that we've talked to, they want to see actual traction in the marketplace. So, it's kind of like startups are the way to go. They want to see, the startup being successful before they're actually going to go get the thing. And our startups have a really tough time understanding all of what's required. So this has been great. And so one of the things I would ask you is if I can get a link to this particular part of the presentation that I can put up on the MCirc, data page there so that our startups can actually see this and we can talk to them about that. It would be great.
We certainly will. We'll share that. And I think many of you have asked on past shows that happened in January. We were a little slow on getting those up. If you go to the YouTube link, everything up to last week, I believe is posted, or the week before, and we'll get this one up and send you a link to that, Ken. But we appreciate that. We want these to be a community resource to get information out there, so we're glad that it's useful for that. We have a question here. Thank you, Ken, for your question and for all that MCirc is doing. We appreciate you guys very much. We have a question here from Francis Glory. Francis, I'm gonna see if you are live with us because I would love to get that. I'm not quite sure I understand the question, so I'm gonna make you live. If you would happen to be able to restate your question live with us, Francis.
Yes, thank you, Gene. Sorry it wasn't worded very well, but so as a startup, I'm designing a product. Have a design partner, have a manufacturing partner. How heavy should be my requirement from a contractual standpoint into, okay, I'm going to audit your quality system. Every document that you create for my product, I need to read in this format, and it needs to come to me as my backup for my own audits with the FDA. Is that the way it works?
Francis, that's a great question. I'm making you honorary adjunct lecturer to this presentation because you just hit the nail on the head. FDA expects that responsibility will have been delegated. Like we were saying earlier, it's your startup's responsibility. It's the medtech company's responsibility for all of this stuff. FDA is going to hold you responsible. So what's a reasonable way to show that you've delegated responsibility? Well, inside your company, you're doing it through management oversight. You're doing it through training. You're showing that you've done this assignment to folks in your organization. But how do you do it outside? We're saying, well, leverage a design partner, leverage a manufacturer. How do you do it? You hit the nail on the head, Francis. You've got to show that they are contractually going to fulfill these obligations. Now, exactly how you do that gets into the details of, what's the best way to phrase that. But they have to fundamentally be accepting the responsibility that they are going to be satisfying certain procedural requirements, that they're going to notify you of certain things, that you're going to own certain things, that they're open to having an FDA audit come in. Of course, the FDA will audit them if they've met the requirements that FDA is looking for. But that's a nail on the head, Francis. I'll see if you have any other questions or comments, but that was a very important question just asked there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll give it a minute here and see if there's any other questions that folks have. But just in brief summary, think about these things as breaking it down into sections. All of it is your responsibility, startup, medtech company. But there's things that you can delegate, like Francis just mentioned, and you can delegate them through contracts. That's what FDA is going to look for. Do you have it in writing that this partner is taking on this responsibility? Really important point. And in all of it, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out. Like I said, we want to educate people. We don't like building quality systems here. We do every now and then build one, but we love making recommendations on that. So if you need some help on that, or you need help on the things that we do love, like design controls and document controls, we would love to chat with you or put you in touch with manufacturers who do some really cool stuff in this area. So thanks for your thoughts and your questions, and really a great interaction there. We appreciate it, everybody. Let me take one look here. I see that we have maybe one more question. Yes, this is from Elliot Perpick. Elliot, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly there. Does FDA perform more than the single audit? How often? That is a great question. Well, FDA does guide their auditors that if the device is class 1, you're probably not going to see an audit from them. They retain the right to, but you'll probably never get audited, frankly. Class 2 devices is their focus, and devices that are in higher risk categories, certainly their focus. They can audit you when they want to. They'll announce that they're going to do an audit. And if you're active, they're likely to come, perhaps every year, perhaps every 2 years. It varies, but it's not just a single one. So, Elliot, you're right in asking the question, because hurdle number one in a company's case might be you're going to get your 510K scrutiny, and you're going to get on the market through that. Not the only way to get on the market for devices, but that's a very common one. And then you think, oh, I made it, I'm on the market, I can go. Well, no, have you implemented all the quality system requirements? And you need to have those in place so that you can be ready for that first audit that comes. It might come a month, and it might come a year, it might come 2 years after your clearance to the market. What triggers that, though, is the fact that you're registered with FDA. When you register to go on the market, that's what allows them to walk through your door and audit you. And that will not just happen once, it'll likely happen multiple times throughout your company's life every couple of years? Great question. We'll pause for one moment more to see if there's any additional questions. And pretty soon here, we're going to get on to our pitch party, which is very, very, very exciting. We'll give it one more second. I'm going to go back to a screen share. And with that, starting today, it is the MedTech Crossroads pitch party. I can't believe that I just got that excited about it, but it is kind of fun. We've had so much cool feedback on this, and we're just so thankful that you're here to be part of it. If you were on the show about 2 or 3 weeks ago, you know that we had Walt Young on the show. He's sort of a legendary investor in our community, does great stuff, been part of a lot of successes. And we were first announcing the pitch party, and Walt said, you know what? I don't like pitch competitions. And I just thought, this is great. I love it. We're just going to roll with this because we need to hear what folks have to say. And we need to understand from those in our community who've seen a lot of deals, when they say, I don't like pitch competitions, we need to sit up and listen. And so I'm going to, without any permission, I'm going to coin the Walt Young rule. And we may change this as time goes on, but here's the point. We can have an interesting discussion about what we like and what we don't like about a particular startup's pitch. But like Walt told us, a good pitch doesn't equal a successful company, and a bad pitch doesn't equal a failure. Pitching and running a business are not the same things. So we're going to recognize these limitations. We're going to have fun, use this as an opportunity to discuss what makes businesses successful. And when our judges at the end of each month award a winner, it's more for fun than anything. So we're going to try to take everything with a grain of salt, but use this as an opportunity to think about, what do we like about this startup? What do we not like? What do I want to ask questions about? And what can we learn as a team? With that, I want to look at this one case study, and this is one I had to look up again because I'd heard this before, and I wanted to double check it. Fred Smith of FedEx, the founder of FedEx, this from Entrepreneur magazine. They, in an article, noted, while attending Yale University in the mid-1960s, Fred Smith wrote an economics term paper on the need for reliable overnight delivery in a computerized information age. His professor was less than impressed and responded, the concept is interesting and well-formed, but in order to earn better than a C, the idea must be feasible. Several years later, through a combination of innovative thinking, unbridled charisma, and sheer determination, Smith would use this interesting but unfeasible concept to found the world's first overnight delivery company and change the transportation industry forever. We always tell people in our company, the time that it takes to spend another day on a project is worth way more than what it would take to get that thing there overnight. So get that overnight shipping. We all use FedEx. It has become a part of our culture. And somebody said it wasn't a really good idea because it wasn't feasible. This is the grain of salt we're taking with all of our pitches. And so we can't pick winners and losers, but we can think about the cool things that are happening. So just to remind you, here's the plan. The MedTech Crossroads pitch party begins today. Eligible startups are US-based MedTech startups, and they will pitch for 10 minutes at the end of each show, weeks 1 through 3 of the month. And on the last show of the month, we will have our panel of judges ponder these startups and ultimately tip their hats toward one of them who are going to receive a $1,000 check from Into Being. Into Being will not participate in the judging. Pitch decks can be sent to pitchparty@medtechcrossroads.org. And we want to make sure that you include these or similar areas: problem statement, vision, value proposition, team, milestones, business model, competitors, and your ask, or functionally equivalent areas. And before we have our first pitch come on today, I want to see if we have a question here. We want to see if we have our friend David Weaver on the show, because there's another thing happening. I think Doran is on the show at the moment. And Doran, I'm making your mic live here. If you are there, are you live with us by any chance?
I think you got Duran, but it's me.
Oh,
Hey.
it's you, David.
Yeah.
Great. It's good to hear your voice. We wanted to hear from you as we're kicking off this inaugural pitch party on MedTech Crossroads. There's something that Cityside Ventures is doing, and we wanted to give you just a minute to tell everyone about it.
Yeah, thank you. I posted a link in the chat room for everybody. On the 23rd of this month, we're running an all-day deal tank, we call it, from 8 until 6. And we have some open slots for technology companies to come and present. It's a 10-minute presentation, 5 minutes Q&A. We keep rolling through it. There's different breaks during the day for some group sessions and panelists and stuff like that. So the agenda's there. You can use that link. There's a place in that link to find where you can ask for an invite to participate.
That's great.
Either as an investor or as a company presenting.
That's wonderful. So you're looking for both investors and presenting companies.
Yes.
We're just going to quickly add your link so that it's in the our video record here.
Oh, great.
We're just going to add that to the video here and do a quick screen share so that it pops up on the screen while we're all talking. There it is, citysideventures.com/thedealtankfeb. And you can get in touch with David and the team there.
We're
and
going to
be
do
part
this
of that.
each month.
Each month, great. Well, we'll look
Yeah.
forward to that. We'll have to check in and keep track of how these are going. And I'm glad that the community is doing these kinds of things. It just keeps people cross-pollinating
Yep.
and thinking about cool companies.
Well, we're glad you're doing your program as well. The more opportunities for companies to stay in Michigan and raise capital here, the better.
That's what we're looking for, David. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for allowing me.
And that's how we like to do it, folks. If you've got something that you want to announce, we are just trying to stir the pot and bring everybody to the table. So thank you for that, David. We appreciate that very much. Okay, with that, the moment you've all been waiting for. We're not going to take a lot of time announcing these. We're going to use 10 minutes. I'm going to get my clock set right here. Because next up, I want to welcome our very first pitch party guest. It's Brad Burke from Windsor Gait Assist, a Michigan company though. Idea came out of our friends across the border in Windsor, but you guys are a Michigan company. Brad, we're going to give you 10 minutes. Take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Gene, for inviting our company to this pitch party. We really appreciate it. I'm just going to get set up here, moving things off my screen. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Brad Burke. I'm a rehabilitation doctor, CEO, and founder of To Innovate, a Michigan-based medical device company. We have seatbelts for cars. We have seatbelts for planes. Why not a traveling seatbelt for stairs and level surfaces? Every day, there are 3,000 ER visits in the US for falls on stairs. And about 180 of these individuals are admitted to the hospital. And they're laying in their hospital bed, and they're scared to get up. They're scared that the therapist won't be able to catch them if they fall. And they're not the only ones that are scared. Patients have had hip replacements, strokes, spinal cord injuries, patients that have been in for weeks because of COVID, they're scared to get out of bed. And they're costing hospitals up to $2,500 a day for delayed hospital discharges. What the therapist will try to do is coax them out of bed into these parallel bars, but the patients can still fall. Moreover, most hospitals have no safe means of training or testing patients on stairs to see if they're actually safe to go back home. So what's the solution to these problems? The Windsor Gait Assist is a patented, cost-effective traveling seatbelt for the elderly and disabled that helps to reduce the risk of serious injuries on stairs and level surfaces. The individual wears a comfortable waist belt with a seatbelt-like attachment, or there can be a shoulder strap or a full body harness like is seen here in the picture with an elastic type tether that goes up to a moving trolley. No battery or electricity is required, and the rail can be mounted on just about any wall, including stairwells. The Windsor Gait Assist has two different braking mechanisms. One is when the individual falls, a trolley rotates down and it temporarily stops. When the individual stands back up, the trolley returns back to its initial position and they can continue walking. This device used in medical facilities will be able to handle about 700 pounds or more. That's based on industry data that we have. There are many benefits to the Windsor Gait Assist over the more expensive ceiling mounted gait systems. We've already mentioned the easy to wear belt system. The government has mandated that for Medicare patients in rehab facilities that they have to be tested on stairs before they go home. However, most hospitals have no safe means of testing patients on stairs. Traditionally, it might take 2 or 3 therapists to walk a patient, but with the Windsor Gait Assist, it only requires 1, maybe 2. That frees up at least 1 physiotherapist to work with other patients. And proximity to patient is very important because these rail systems can be installed on just about any hospital floor, including the ICU. Patients can see these being used and can say, hey, I'm willing to give that a try. I'll feel much more confident. It gets them out of bed, it gets them walking sooner, and gets them out of the hospital quicker. And this saves hospitals thousands of dollars. We're excited about some new patent pending features. For the stair model, one of the mechanisms allows resistance going downstairs, but not up. This keeps the shoulder belt nice and snug. It gives the person more confidence, and it's an added safety feature. In the middle here is a moving pad. This is attached to the trolley, and it actually moves with the user when they're walking along. So should they happen to fall towards the wall, they won't suffer any wall-related injuries. And this pad is designed so that it folds up in half underneath so that the handrail can be used. On the right is a stair or bathroom model. We had a hospital come to us and say, we have falls in the bathrooms. What can you do for us? So we went to work and we designed a model here that will navigate tight corners in any direction. The future is wall-mounted gait assist systems. They are cheaper, they're easier to use, they're easier to install. And we believe that this is the direction of the future. And we are the only company leading in wall-mounted gait assist systems. It's a huge market. There are over 20 million Americans who have serious difficulties on stairs. And just to give you an example, there are 100,000 stair lifts sold every year in North America. In our interviews with patients for customer discoveries, we discovered that many don't like stair lifts. It makes them look and feel disabled. So we believe that for every stair lift sold in North America, that we can sell a Windsor Gait Assist. But if we just look at the medical facilities, there are 46,000 hospitals, nursing homes, and physiotherapy clinics in North America for a serviceable market of 470 million. We believe that by 2025, that we can obtain 8% share of the market for $38 million. Here's our competitors. The Solo Step and Zero G are the ceiling mounted gait systems, and they're fairly expensive. The Light Gait is a moving trolley that helps to suspend the individual while they're walking. The Windsor Gait Assist is the only medical device that gets a check mark in all of these categories. Low maintenance, there's no battery or electricity, and space saver. This is something that's important because the individual can walk very close to the wall without suffering wall injuries because of our moving pad. Our competitors have to stay away from the wall, so it takes up more space. In busy hospitals in acute care, when you have stretchers, you got patients, you got doctors, nurses walking around, they want the open space. They don't want it being taken up. That's why you don't see our competitors use in acute care floors very often or at all. Another thing that's important is stair use. The only other competitor here is the Zero G. Look how expensive it is. And you have to build a set of stairs in a physiotherapy gym to use it. The Windsor Gait Assist can be easily and cheaply and quickly installed on most wall surfaces. And the price is very, very attractive, $6,500. For our IP, the US patent has issued. We have other patents that are pending, including a Canadian patent. For the FDA, it's a Class 1 device, it's GMP, and it's 510K exempt. For a revenue model, it's going to cost $6,500 for medical facilities, and that will include a rail, a trolley, and likely 3 belts. We believe that we can get this model much cheaper for residential use due to a number of factors. Some of those are it's a shorter rail, smaller trolley, maybe a greater number of units sold, bringing down the price per unit. Our go-to-market strategy is direct sales, and we're going to target the medical facilities first, hospitals, physiotherapy clinics, and nursing homes. We believe that this will give us greater credibility. It's also a safer launch because it's being used with therapists working directly with the patients. And so we can fine-tune this for the residential market. Also, patients will be able to see this being used in different facilities and say, hey, I want that for my home. And so that's a marketing feature right there. Looking at our financial model, and this is only for medical facilities in North America. We expect by 2022 that we're going to start sales to the medical facilities, and by 2026 that gross sales will reach 40 million with a profit of about $9 million. Again, only medical facilities. The residential market is much, much greater, much more lucrative. Looking at our milestones, we've already developed a prototype, a basic one that we've done some testing with, but we want to do further tests. We expect to enter medical facility sales in 2022, and then 2023, we want to enter the residential market. We're hoping by 2025 to have entered the European and Asia markets. This is even larger because there's more demand for this project because the homes there are more vertical. There's more stairs, and so it represents a great opportunity globally. We're looking for investment of $200,000. This is going to help with development of a formal prototype and more rigorous testing. Also, finish off the additional patent process in North America. And we're going to hire a business developer to help us get to the next stages in our company. And that's going to include manufacturing and rollout, hopefully right here in Michigan. Here's our team. I'm the CEO and founder of 2Innovate. Erin Burke is a physician assistant. She's another co-founder. Charles McCumber is our product engineer, and Deborah Livna is our business advisor. And I just want to have a shout out here to Accelerate Health for all their assistance in the last year. Our vision is to one day see the Windsor Gait Assist welcomed into millions of homes and thousands of medical facilities worldwide. Safer ambulation is now more affordable thanks to the Windsor Gait Assist, brought to you by 2Innovate. Thank you.
Brad, thank you very much. We appreciate your presenting today. And I've got one more question for you, which is the question we always love to ask all of our panelists. And that is, what's your passion? Why do you do what you do?
Well, actually, that begins with a short story, how this all started. I had a patient back in 2015 who had been stuck in his basement for almost 3 years. He was afraid to go up the stairs because he thought he might fall. He didn't have a stair lift. I'm not sure if you could have even afforded one that would accommodate his weight, but he was stuck down there. And the fire department and the paramedics got him out of his house eventually, got him to the hospital, and I was the rehab doctor who was supposed to work with him. But the therapist couldn't even get him up to walk. He was scared to get up. They couldn't for sure test him on stairs. And so I got thinking to myself, there's got to be something out there that we can do to help these patients cost effectively get up and out of their homes in these stairs. And so it's patients like that who I see that we can really benefit. That's just one patient. There's millions around the world that are in situations similar. They just can't afford a stair lift system, or they don't want one. And so it's patients like that that drive me to innovate products like this.
That's great, Brad. We appreciate you being on the show, and be sure to tune in on the 26th when we have our judges talking about each of our 3 presenters for the month of February. We appreciate your being here today.
Great. Thank you, Gene.
And with that, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you for joining us here on MedTech Crossroads. Hope you like the new format with the pitch party at the end. We'll be enjoying that for at least the next couple months. We've got the startups coming through the door, and feel free to send out that pitch party at medtechcrossroads.org if anyone wants to join. We just got another submission earlier today, and we're looking forward to continuing this with you on this great journey that we're on together. Thanks for being with us today. Goodbye.